What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Expected Bets for your go-to podcast for all things hockey betting. I'm Gator Betting, joined by my co-host, Franco the Banker. Franco, we've talked about some interesting teams today. We got Calgary, San Jose, and now we get Edmonton, the runners-up in the Stanley Cup Finals. After what we thought was going to be kind of a complete blowout, Florida takes a 3-0 lead. Edmonton comes battling back. And now Edmonton's made a bunch of offseason additions that I don't know are really going to help this team moving forward. And they lost a bunch of key guys, especially in that depth department. Before we do that, how are you doing?
Good. Feels like we're making some progress here, man. Season's very, very close to this point now. And yeah, we're trying to get through this Pacific Division. And yeah, I mean, I'm ready for the season to start at this point because it just feels like doing these team breakdowns is nice because it gets you refreshed on what happened
Yeah.
over the off season. But I'm ready to start betting some damn games,
I mean, global series today, a little appetizer, I'd say, for the NHL season. But all right, with that being said, let's get into the team breakdown for the Edmonton Oilers. Getting in now to the team breakdown for the Stanley Cup runner-up Edmonton Oilers. Last season, they made a run, Franco. They finally made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. And for the past 3 seasons now, they've been beaten by the Stanley Cup champions. It seems like they're always the bridesmaids and never the bride. But they make some interesting offseason additions to try to shake up this roster. So they do lose a bunch of key pieces. McLeod's gone. Fogel's gone. Broberg's gone, Holloway's gone, and a bunch of not necessarily key pieces. Campbell's gone, Cece's gone, Carrick's gone, Desjardins gone, but they did bring in, you mentioned it before the show, Leon Draisaitl's got line mates. Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson joined the squad, Emberson, Savoy in a trade with Buffalo, which I think is going to be an interesting addition. I don't think he's going to play this season. But if Savoy turns out to kind of be that highly touted prospect that they've said he is, this squad gets another goal scorer and much needed depth scoring. They could be really dangerous in the next few seasons. They also add Josh Brown and Colin Delia in net. Franco, I'll start here. A lot of changes for this team, right? We've seen the Stanley Cup champions not necessarily do a complete rebuild. Stanley Cup runner-ups kind of go through that interesting phase. Like the Oilers didn't have a ton of cap because they knew they needed to pay Draisaitl, who re-signed. McDavid's up next year, who's going to get the largest contract in NHL history. But they did kind of shuffle some things around where this roster does look like it could compete again.
Yeah, on paper it looks pretty good actually. I really do wish that they were able to bring back Holloway and Broberg. I know St. Louis pulled some sneaky moves to move those two pieces away from this team because they are like the more young, cheap options, I guess you would say, for this team. So I think the
Not
depth
cheap
would have looked,
anymore. The
yeah,
offer sheets, yeah.
yeah, it's true. But the depth would have looked even better. It probably would have been the best they've had, I think, in that we've seen with the McDavid era, right? Like just because of the amount of money that Draisaitl and McDavid make, it always makes it difficult for this team to build depth around them, right? They're almost like the Toronto Maple Leafs, where it's just like you have these big name guys that are making a ton of money, and it's just like, and here's a bunch of fringe players to kind of piece around them, right? So this doesn't feel like that's the case though this year. It feels like maybe they've actually kind of added some, obviously Skinner and Arvidsson are getting up there in age, but I feel like this is the best line mates that Trisail's had besides just being on a line with McDavid, I guess. But yeah, in a while, it's always Yamamoto, Puljujarvi, uh, Evander Kane has really kind of been a letdown overall. I would say. I know he came in with high expectations and he's had struggle with injuries and stuff like that. So this feels good, kind of at least the top two, better than it has previously. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, Arvidsson coming off an injury last year where he only played 18 games. So it's going to be interesting to see how quickly he returns to form. And Jeff Skinner at 32 is getting up there in age. So while on paper it may seem like Draisaitl's best line mates, there's potential for it to go awry for sure there. The departures, though, I think, like you mentioned before, are going to be kind of that area that really hurts this team, right? In net, we'll just go by position, but let's start in net. Jack Campbell, obviously not a huge loss. He was lost last year. Like, moved down to the AHL. Stuart Skinner took over that number one role. And while he had his inconsistencies during the season, he did play pretty well in the postseason.
Yeah, I think Skinner is like the proof that teams should give their goalies a little bit more time, right? We always, as fans of teams and as the onlookers of these teams, we always see a guy come in, whether they're highly touted or not, like they get that starting role. Maybe they have a good season to start or decent season, and they look like they're good. Then their second season is kind of like and then their third season they kind of like fall off a cliff or just aren't progressing the way you want to see, and then typically teams move on from guys at that point. So I think Edmonton kind of got rewarded a little bit for sticking with Skinner and not moving on from him like they could have. And I think going forward you can feel at least confident that he's going to be the guy. And again, goaltenders year to year always change, so maybe this is a down year for him, hopefully not, but the when it comes down to it, you have your starter. Okay, so at least you have that locked down, and you can't say that for most teams. So it feels like most teams you can't say that. So at least you're good there. And Pickard isn't too bad as a backup either.
Yeah, their defensive unit, which has had issues in the past, especially the depth. It's started by Ekholm and Bouchard, and then you got Nurse and Emberson and Kulak and Stetcher. Again, it feels like at least the top pairing's pretty solid, right? And Ekholm and Bouchard. Nurse has shown flashes, both good and bad. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of how he meshes with Ty Emberson, who they just brought in. Maybe that's kind of some more stability, at least defensively, for Nurse that he needs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Emberson, to be honest with you, but we know that the pairing of CC and Nurse was a train wreck. Obviously, we saw it towards the end of the season. It was bad. They split them up and kind of things started working out, and then they put them back together for some reason. I don't know why, and it just didn't work out. So moving on from CC and getting Emberson feels like a win, regardless of how good or bad he's going to be. So, you kind of can't really move on from Nurse because of his contract. So you just need to kind of pair him with the right piece to give him the ability to play the game that he can feel comfortable and at least be relatively productive.
Yeah, in the big knock on the Oilers, right, has always been, oh, there's no depth scoring. The Oilers proved in last postseason they don't need depth scoring at all. Like they did in in the Stanley Cup Finals, they got depth scoring, right? That we didn't see before. But the playoff series before that, it was the McDavid and Draisaitl show. And you wonder, like, there's no signs of him slowing down, right? So you can't necessarily say, when is it going to run out? McDavid's the best player in the world, and there's not really, maybe McKinnon that you could say is kind of on his level, but McDavid's in a whole nother tier, it feels like. And so now you add a little bit more top talent to that top six forward group, and it seems like they're just going to kind of run this same recipe back of just that's their scoring. Their bottom two lines up front are kind of shut down lines. They'll be matched up with other teams' top forwards, and they're just going to have this same old recipe essentially that they just use.
Yeah, and now you get a full season of Henrique too. Like I think that we're kind of underrating him a little bit, at least as far as saying that they don't have any depth scoring. He's shown in the past that he can be a productive center in this league. He put up points for Anaheim a few of those seasons, so I don't want to say he's doesn't have scoring talent at all. I think he's at least decent. Connor Brown was like just terrible offensively last season. Like it felt like he just couldn't score to save his life, and then finally got one in one of the games in the cup. So yeah, I think still when it comes down to it, this doesn't have like the feel of a team that's going to be rolling four lines in a tight game. They're just going to roll his top two. One thing to point out too, I mean, I know we talked about Arvidsson's injury concerns, and he has had plenty over the last few years. So I really do hope he can stay healthy because I think he'll be really fun on this team. But we talked about Savoy at least, in passing as far as a player they acquired. If I feel like if Arvidsson does miss time, you would have to think that Savoy is going to get run here, and that could kind
Savoy,
of must be more exciting.
yeah, Savoy was one of the Sabres, I think, top one or two prospects heading into this season. And it's not. I mean, going back to the Calder race, like we talk about these rookies being put in bad situations, whether they're like just the talent around them. If he's now placed on a line with Leon Draisaitl and Skinner, or Skinner gets hurt and Savoy steps in for him, right? Like he's not in a bad position by any means to have an extremely productive season. And he has the players around him that can match his offensive talent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is your pathway right there. Obviously, we'll see. We'll see. I'm rooting for Arvidsson to stay healthy because I think on that line, like he's gonna be firing a ton of puck with Drysdale setting him up. So that'll be exciting to watch. But if that happens, I be ready to grab Savoy props and Calder if they offer it once if that happens.
Yeah, I certainly agree. All right, before we get into the best and worst case scenario for the Edmonton Oilers, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, BetterHelp. This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back to school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major, it's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show. Getting into the best and worst case scenario for the Edmonton Oilers, Franco, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. Best case, they win the cup. Worst case, they don't. And worst case, and going off that, is it's like a Western Conference final. They get bounced in the second round, and McDavid and this squad just can't get over that hump.
Yeah, it's crazy to say worst case is that like not get there, but it does feel like that. I mean, especially with the veterans that they've added, right? We're not looking at a team that added young talent to this, to the roster. They added veterans to be more productive. So you want to see them take a step. Like we said, we have the goaltender that, at least in theory, is the guy. We have two of the best players in the entire league, and McDavid and Draisaitl. And I mean, Hyman had a hell of a season last year, and again, he's almost, regardless of what you think of him as a talent, like just being able to play on a line with McDavid and being that kind of net front gritty guy on that power play is just, he's going to be productive by default. So I think the pieces are still here for what should be another cup run. And the West feels a little weaker than it did last year, as far as, you know, as we're going through all these previews, and especially this division. They should be able to just pretty much walk into the playoffs without any kind of worry, and um, be a top team in this division. So yeah, the path is there. I think the West is weaker, so I think it is Stanley Cup or bust, and actually win it this time. It feels like they've been on the doorstep for so long at this point, and McDavid seems destined for it, right? And I'm sure the NHL would love for McDavid to get his cup. So all the pieces and you know, storylines and everything are in place for this to be the team to do it, but we'll see, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into the team and player futures, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, DraftKings. TD, Tutty, taking it to the house. Whatever you call a touchdown, they matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season is back in full swing, and who doesn't love rooting for a touchdown? So be sure to check out the latest odds at DraftKings Sportsbook. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only at DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Now looking ahead at the Edmonton Oilers team futures, their regular season points total is at 108.5. They're minus 1,400 to make the playoffs, minus 110 to win the division. The only division favorite to be minus money, which is interesting. But as we said before, looking at this Pacific division, isn't necessarily the strongest. You could argue it is the weakest division in the NHL right now. Plus 350 to win the conference and plus 800 to win the Stanley Cup. Franco, do you have any bets on this team futures conference winner at plus 350? Oddly enough, seems like there's some value there.
I think that's where I would go. I don't want to do the 108.5. I just feel like I not that I don't think they can get there. I certainly think they can. I just don't really love that number. Yeah, I think conference winner feels right. Like we said, the West feels a little bit weaker, so the path seems like it should be pretty clear for them to get there. Obviously, you know, injuries and stuff can derail any of these type of future bets, but yeah, I think that would be where I would go. Conference winner, Stanley Cup at plus 800 doesn't feel terrible either. So those would be the two I'll be looking at. I don't really have an interest in a division winner at minus 110 because they could be a team that doesn't necessarily they don't need to win the division to win a cup or win the conference. Let's put it that way. They certainly can with the talent they have, but they could, you know, after a long season last year, they could opt to rest players towards the end of the season and not necessarily like chase that.
Yeah, you're almost wondering if Vancouver again takes another step forward and kind of competes with them for that division, or even Vegas sneaks in as a dark horse there. Yeah, I just wouldn't lay that number. Not necessarily like I fully expect them to win the division, right? But again, that's just not great value from a betting perspective when you're looking at it at taking a unit, 1.1 units, and letting it go on a division winner in a season-long race where there is kind of a factor if Skinner struggles or gets hurt. That goaltending in Picard has never played kind of that first goaltending role. And we saw it last year when goalies went down, the backups played great for the first week or two, but it's a whole different grind that they're not used to be the main guy in net.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, I mean, we've seen like plus 230s or plus 200s for like favorites for divisions in these other divisions. So you're at least getting value in those situations. There's just no value here laying a minus 110 on that. You don't want to have to bank your unit bet on no injuries or no nonsense happening. I think this team's a playoff team regardless. So take that 350 conference or the 800 Stanley Cup and take some value.
Agreed. Looking now at some player points props, McDavid at 132.5, Bouchard at 83.5, Skinner at 64.5, Draisaitl at 110.5, Ryan Nugent Hopkins at 82.5, and Hyman at 74.5 for points. For goals, McDavid 47.5, Bouchard 17.5, Draisaitl at 49.5, and Hyman at 43.5. Franco, any of those stand out to you?
I mean,
they got a laundry list of players here, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of players. I feel like you're buying at the top for a lot of these guys. McDavid has kind of shaken his injury woes. I feel like his first few seasons in the league, he's always kind of missed games, so you would maybe be looking at an under kind of based on that. But the last 3 seasons, he's played like 76 or more games. So
132, 153, 123.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, 133 is a lot. Again, it's he has to be perfect. So, like, if anything, I would lean under, but like, there's no way in hell I want to take that just because I know who McDavid is and what he is. But again, like you're talking about season-long prop where everything needs to go right and he needs to stay healthy. If he misses 5, 7, 10 games, like, you're going to be hard pressed to reach 133 points. I don't care what player you are. So that would be kind of where I would lean there. Bouchard 83.5 feels really high. Do I dare say Skinner is like the guy I want to target here?
I was thinking the same exact thing. I think Skinner at 64.5 is the guy you're targeting, because even if he ends up on that, if he does end up on that power play too, that's a huge boost to his production. And playing with Draisaitl, who has a point total of 110.5, if Skinner gets in on even half those points, playing on a line with him, he's at 55, and he just needs 10 more points on his own, whether that comes through the power play or wherever. It feels like Skinner at 64.5, maybe his last year in the NHL, probably is his last year in the NHL, kind of rides off into the sunset on the wings of Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, I mean, there's production to be had playing on a line with Draisaitl, and who knows if they shake up lines at some point. Maybe they move Nugent Hopkins back down, Skinner moves up with McDavid. I mean, that would be even more of a dream scenario, right? So 64.5 just feels really low. And like I said, I feel like these other guys that have been there are at their max numbers. So I just don't really have much interest in it. Obviously, Skinner could just be washed and could be dust, as they say. Who knows? But I mean, he was pretty damn productive. Not last season, but the season before with Buffalo. So, and I'm not going to even argue that these players that are on this team are going to be a lot more productive than what he was working with on Buffalo.
Catch that Paterka point, baby. There it is.
Yeah,
for all the Oilers fans watching the Global Series at the same time. Yeah, I think Skinner's the way to go here. Hyman obviously it's weird, like, right? You think these players are going to regress slightly. But again, just saying that you're going to take a Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman under sounds terrible to say, right? So with all the other value on other props across the other 31 teams, it seems like it's better to kind of look there. This team, while it's one of the better teams in the NHL, if not the best, you're looking more towards team props, conference winner, Stanley Cup winner, rather than individual player awards, just because of that injury risk, right? Like if McDavid goes out again for 10 games. He was out for what, 8 last year, 6 or 8 last year, still managed to put up 132 points. Insane, right? So you just don't know. And with Skinner at 64.5, he's in that top 4. They're going to score, right? Like, this team's going to score. So, and there's going to be points available to get. So that's where I would lean. I might just take that. I think that I'm probably going to add that to the betting card. I like Skinner at 64.5.
Yeah,
I really
agree.
do. I
agree.
think that's where you go. You try to find value despite kind of all these big guys. That's where you're leaning. But moving along to the trophies, Rocket, Draisaitl 8-1, McDavid 9-1, Hyman 22-1, Art Ross, McDavid -140, Draisaitl 10-1. Again, it's just like, is there value there? I don't know. Maybe Draisaitl to win the Rocket at 8-1 doesn't seem like terrible value. McDavid -140 to win the Art Ross. He probably will win it again if he has remotely similar season to his past 3, right? You figure he wins it. But again, that -140, just like their division winner, you're not touching. Hart Trophy, McDavid +150, Draisaitl 20-1. Norris, Bouchard 7-1, Vezina, Skinner 40-1. Any of those interest you?
It's tough. I mean, again, you're buying at the top here. I think that's the main sticking point for me, right? Like, I feel like just the value is sucked away because of the abilities players. I would probably at least somewhat consider Draisaitl for the Rocket. I think that's a decent value at 8-1. It doesn't feel too bad. We know he can be a goal scorer. I would like to kind of see. I haven't really watched much of their preseason to see how he looks. Obviously, he had like some issues health wise towards the end of the season last year and didn't really look right overall, I would say. So I want to look at that before I place that, but that might not be a bad look. Yeah, that Art Ross at minus money for McDavid, I don't want to do it, especially with Kucherov and McKinnon playing the way they are. I do think that it's McDavid's to lose, like you said, but I just for a season long prop, man, I can't lay -140, and same for the Hart Trophy at +150. That one's more subjective as far as like, how players do, and we kind of talked about Kucherov being someone we were looking at for that prop just because of the value on him, and we kind of talked about like the NHL looking almost to find someone else other than McDavid on a trophy like that if somebody puts up a good enough season. So I don't really care for that. Norris for Bouchard doesn't feel too bad, 7-1. If we're just banking off of his offensive production, I had him last year like 14-1, so I feel like we're getting a significant downturn in the price, even though I don't think he was really ever in it because of Hughes's awesome start to the season, really. So we'll see how it starts out, but I think Bouchard at 7-1 and the Draisaitl Rocket would be the two I would be looking at probably when all said and done.
Agreed. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up here? Again, this team seems poised to make another Stanley Cup run, but they do have some interesting factors. Like you said, the Skinner doesn't kind of stand up to be the guy that he was in the playoffs. Skinner and Arvidsson don't click with Draisaitl, but even with all those considered, this team seems like it's a pretty good bet to they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to go on a pretty deep run, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to as far as betting and the day-to-day here with this team, you're going to continue to get some value, at least in the right spots. I'll make McDavid 2 points. And when he's going right, like, just keep taking it until they move it to -140 or whatever, just keep hammering it. Same for Draisaitl. When he's looking right and he's scoring, you're going to get his goal prop at +120, +130. And yeah, I think you're going to have a lot of value here, even though this is a team that's up there as one of the best in the league. And I think when all said and done, they should be one of the teams competing for the cup, at least on the western side of the league.
Agreed. All right. We want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Expected Bets 4. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Also, check out our social media on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you again to our wonderful sponsors, BetterHelp and DraftKings. Once more, we appreciate everyone for listening, and we will talk to you guys soon.